Hello everyone, welcome to the Everything Dodgeball podcast. I'm your host Stefan Leitinger, here with another episode of the Road to Limerick series. I'm here coming to Sweden with Kajsa and Pierre from the Swedish Spectaculars. And so first of all, maybe introduce yourselves, guys. Thank you for being on a Sunday morning, especially you, Pierre. So Kajsa, maybe I start with you. Who are you? And what have you been up to in the world of dodgeball lately?
Yeah, so my name is Kajsa, and I've been playing dodgeball for 3 years now. And this will be my third championship with Sweden. And I live in Stockholm and typically work out in the Stockholm Dodgeball Association. And and I play in the mixed category and in women's. Yeah, so that's a little bit
All
about me.
right, beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've started dodgeball 3 years ago. What did you do before that you got such a fast track into the national program and the women's and the mixed division?
Yeah, so I played handball, so I was like ending my handball career. So before I started playing dodgeball, I played Division One handball as a shooter. So it was very natural for me to start playing dodgeball, and throwing a ball was very easy for me. And then over time, I've also developed other dodgeball skills like catching and like the strategical aspect of the game.
Okay,
So
beautiful. So
yeah,
that sounds like you have a very good fundament for
yeah,
dodgeball, and then that makes it much more clear why you transitioned that
yeah,
fast into such a strong team. Awesome. So,
yeah.
and then Pierre, obviously not a lot of people know you in the dodgeball world, so maybe give us a little bit of an overview. Who is Pierre?
I'm Pierre, and I don't know. I started dodgeball in 2010 in Stockholm when it was still kind of a just play around thing. Went out traveling, came back, and wondered. I wonder if they're still playing. And they were like, "Okay, England contacted us. We're playing Euros now. It's a whole thing. You have to come." And I joined. So I joined for Paris 2016 was my first when we were still playing with 3 balls just before the transition into 5 balls. After that, moved to Gothenburg, started the club of Gothenburg Dodgeball Association. Shameless plug. Ever since, I've been working in EDF and WDBF with dodgeball as a whole. And now, well, yeah, been playing in the mix, but since a couple of years back, I've been coaching the mixed team specifically. Um, yeah, I think uh, I think that's a fast overview of my dodgeball
Perfect.
currently.
So basically, a jack of all trades when it comes to dodgeball. Has seen it all, has done it all, and
Yes,
now you try to give your wisdom to the younger players as well. So are you gonna play in Limerick as well, or just coach?
I am not gonna play. I am committed to coaching, and
Oh,
yeah, I think that's a good thing overall. We had a transition a couple of years back when Sweden was growing, where we were kind of exploring should a coach be able to play or not. And when we had very few players, that didn't really make any sense to exclude that thing. But as soon as we grew, it kind of became everybody has to have their role to kind of have that outside perspective on the match, etc.
yeah, that's definitely a step in the right direction. Obviously, not all the programs can afford to do that at this point because, yeah,
Yeah,
you need players who have a lot of experience and who are ready to step away from the playing and taking on that coaching role. But I think every nation who has the luxury of doing that knows how important that is and how much better it is than to play and to coach as well.
for sure.
But
Absolutely.
so awesome that you're doing that. So, Kaiser, what I want to ask you is you come from a very professional sport in Sweden, a very popular sport in Sweden, and you played Division One, you said, so at a very high level, and then you transitioned into dodgeball. So, what was like the first impression when you came into the dodgeball scene, coming from a professional recognized sport?
So I remember from my first practice that the energy is a bit different in handball. It's always been very competitive, but in dodgeball, everybody's very friendly and inclusive. And I think that was something that was kind of a contrast or amazed me in the beginning that it was like a person I've never met before like hugged me on my first practice. And that's not normal in handball. It's like, it's more if you go to a new team or anything, it will be more like a competitive vibe or energy. But here people were super friendly, so I really enjoyed that. And I think even at a higher level in the national team, it's such a amazing energy and familiar territory, and you always feel super welcome. So I love that about dodgeball.
That is great.
Uh,
And
yeah,
so sorry if you wanted to
yeah.
continue. Didn't want to
No,
interrupt you.
no, no, but that
Okay,
was
so
like the biggest thing that stood out to me. But then, of course, it's a bit different because, like in dodgeball at the national level, we're kind of spread out. But in handball, when you have your team, you're more like based in the same geographical area, so that's easier to practice together. So that's also
mhm,
one difference.
okay. And so like the social aspect and the
Yeah.
social structure of the sport, very different. What about
Yes.
like the competitive structures and the competitive nature of the game?
Yeah, I think for me, the thing with the rules that you have different rules at different, like in words and euros, you have different rule sets. For me, that was kind of weird to get used to because, like in handball, you have the same rules regardless on what like level you play on. So that was one thing that stood out to me. But I think it's also a very big difference playing on a club level and then on the national level in regards to like the quality of dodgeball increased so much and everybody's so good at everything. So yeah.
Okay, cool. So Pierre, you've been around a little bit longer. I've talked a few episodes back with Ben, so we got a lot into sort of structural things in Sweden and how the program is sort of starting to develop. But it's been half a year back then, and there were a lot of like ideas and new things that you wanted to implement. How do you feel like the program and the national team and the preparation for the Euros in Limerick have changed over the last, let's say, few years from your perspective?
Wow, good question. From I thought you were gonna say from a few month perspective, and already there we've seen a lot of changes in terms of, well, especially commitment of sitting, watching material, and kind of committing to having a broader understanding of the tactics and strategy in general. But if you're asking over the years, wow, that's night and day. I remember back in the day where we would have players come on and we're playing Euros for the first time, and they would get on court, and I genuinely heard one comment go, "What? There's five balls?" And you go, "Oh, that's that's gonna be it's gonna be a rough day for you." So from that, and just having the preparation of saying, okay, this is what we're doing, having national team training camps, and kind of growing into a more professionalized version of dodgeball has, yeah, I don't even know where to start. Well, I think maybe that portrays the difference from where we were and where we are now. But yeah, I did listen to the episode with Ben, solid, and many of the things that he was talking about has been in some shape or form implemented. We've been talking a lot about the kind of risk taking structure of dodgeball in terms of, is this a good choice? Is this a bad? Sorry, is this a risky choice? Is this a safe choice? Is this a bad choice? In so many words, and a lot of that has kind of seeped into Ben and myself way of thinking, and we've been trying to explore that with the players as a team. So I think that was actually a very fruitful light bulb in Ben's head that then got extrapolated onto the team.
Awesome. That is good to hear. So I'm looking forward to seeing the fruits of that light bulb going off. So do you feel
Yeah.
like this season, Dodgeball Sweden, like the league, has there been sort of a change in how teams approach the sport tactically? Did you see like a leveling up from the last few years?
So we don't have a national league in Sweden. We have a little bit of a local match. We have a league in Gothenburg. Kajsa, I don't know. Do you have a league in Stockholm?
We have a foam league in Stockholm. So in Stockholm, we have foam that's growing a lot, and more people are starting to play foam, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. Committed to cloth as I am, we have seen teams approaching things from a very much more structured way, and yeah, making less of those kind of very classical mistakes that Sweden have been doing, and newer nations in general, where when you become a little bit more experienced, you go, oh, that is one of the classical mistakes, but you have to understand them and get them from a team perspective first. So I think we've seen an upswing in the generalized understanding of every player on every team going, okay, this is what we're doing, and then competing against each other, which then brings you into kind of the meta game of, okay, so what do we do now that they are doing this, rather than we always do this. This is a problem. So yes, I think we've seen a good differentiation between what it was and what it is now, but maybe more so city to city, just due to the fact that we don't have a national league and we haven't had our nationals yet. It's gonna be later this year.
Okay. Okay. So basically lots of people and player who gonna play together on the national team haven't competed against each other throughout the season or haven't played each other.
Yeah, rather played with each other, because we still have
Hmm.
national team training camps and we meet each other and we play, but we haven't had the kind of face-offs that
Okay.
a national league provides.
Okay, that is very interesting. Because like I feel at least in Austria it's the way like we try to progress what we think about the game and try to teach it to the national squad, and then it sort of flows out into the clubs, and throughout the year, throughout the season, you play against each other, you prove your ideas, everyone starts with basically the same theoretical knowledge, and then you try to progress it in your team, and then at the end of the year you go back together and try to build on that. So I think that season always shows, if you look back a few seasons ago, the way teams played and the way they play now, there is a lot of difference. And it's like there is a very, I don't know, every club has a different style, definitely, but it's still a very Austrian play. And if I see like the English league, for example, that's a very different style of dodgeball that
Yeah.
they are playing than the Austrian style. And I don't get to see a lot of other dodgeball videos because there aren't a lot of really good streams out there, sadly, as of yet. So I think pretty much it's England and us, at least from what I know. But yeah, I think that is very interesting to see the development throughout the season and then bring it to the national program and see where you go from there. So that is interesting that you train together, but you sort of don't have that sparring opportunity in leagues.
Yeah, and I think that, and I'm guessing now, but I think that's the case for a lot of European nations, where you have programs, you're trying to play together, and there's so much focus on that of the highest level of competition that there is in Europe. So people play with each other, but not necessarily that much against each other, with the exception of like nationals. But I'm feeling a little bit now that I'm sitting here, Kajsa. Shouldn't we just commit to kind of like pumping up a Swedish league and then start streaming it? If not for Stefan, then yeah, let's do this.
Please.
Yeah, sounds good.
Sounds like another light bulb moment.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that is basically what this Dodgeball podcast is about, bringing light bulb moments to Sweden. So
Perfect.
all right, Kaiser. So you've been entering the scene where I would say, at least from an outside perspective, the Swedish national program and their whole approach to the game has changed a lot, because in the beginning, 2010, and I've seen it from 2013 on, there was a lot of that social aspect to it and a lot of that inclusivity and that fun and like all of those things. But then the longer they played and the more handball players they got and the more competitive the game got, the more also the competitive structures entered the game and the will to win stuff, basically. So I'd say 3 years ago the program was already at a very high level and there were lots of really good players, but still the progression throughout those last 3 years was probably even more dramatic, I would say. So what is your feeling on that? Again, like entering it with that mindset of coming from a very competitive sport, finding that new sport, seeing it's really open, really inclusive, really fun, but then also going to Euros and being there for 2 or 3 years and seeing where the game and the national squad developed?
Yeah, so my first championship was Oisek and in Croatia, and that was honestly like my first experience playing in the national team and playing like competitive dodgeball at that level. And then I only played the women's category, and I didn't really know what to expect. We had a really good team that year, and it was really enjoyable. But honestly, I didn't even know like all the rules. So it was kind of like I always want to win, and I'm super competitive. But I think we really managed to use like all of our strength in that championship, and that led us pretty far as we got for fourth place against we lost against Italy in the bronze match, and it was very near for us to take a medal. And as I understood it, that would be like the first medal for the women's. So I think for this Euros, like our goal is to take a medal, and I think we're really gonna like try to accomplish that goal with the women's. And I think we have really developed like the not only because we have always had like the strength in our throwing as for the time I have been playing, but I think we really try to develop like our strategical decision making and making better choices on the court. Because you cannot only win dodgeball using strength, you also need to be smart and, as Pierre mentioned, take risk at the right time. So we've been working a lot of like risk management and like the overall like strategical thinking, and I think that will help us a lot. Not only going like trying to power, but only also using other tools in our toolbox. I think will help us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
So
that's like a good thing for Sweden overall that we have tried to be more strategical.
yeah, absolutely. So let's maybe get into a little bit of a specific,
Yep.
maybe an example. So you both said
Okay.
there is a lot of emphasis on the strategic side of dodgeball now, and that sort of risk-taking behavior. And in the
Yeah.
past, Sweden has been known to be quite loose with their ball possession and go really aggressive, rely on their throw, and maybe not back it up in certain situation when it got a little bit more complicated. And that's where other teams I can still remember one situation from the World Cup, which has been quite recently, where I saw the video where you were up, I think 4 against Brad, and in a situation there was not a lot of time left, and he just makes an underhand throw, takes one out, takes a catch, turns the set around, and it really felt from the outside. I was like, oh, it was painful to watch. Obviously, it's Brad, and it was an awesome highlight reel, but you could really see in this situation where you had such a dominant position, and there was still that risk-taking behavior, and the decision making wasn't up to that level to handle a player like him. So specifically when you look at that situation, for example, what kind of steps have you taken to prevent that from happening in the future?
Do you want to have a go
Uh,
at this, Kajsa, or should I?
Yeah, I can start because like that clip, like it's still like hurts in my soul because I think we played that
Same.
game so good, and like and I think we were up like 6-1 in the beginning, honestly, and then he turned that around, and it's very impressive from his side to be able to do that. But I think at times from a strategical like perspective in Sweden, we sometimes try to play like save maybe too soon in a game instead of like ending the set. And I guess me with a handball background, I would prefer like a higher risk than maybe other people with a dodgeball background because they might prefer like playing it more safe. But so that's also like depending on what your preference is in that regard. But yeah, that clip really that's awful.
It
What do you
touches the
think, Pierre?
soul.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm just happy you started because I was ready to avoid the question. It hurts. It really does, right in the bone. And everything that can go wrong does go wrong. Like not only is there a catch and he does a hit, but we also have one of the players just walking off court,
Yeah.
like hasn't done a line fault the whole tournament and just like
Oh
steps
yeah.
back slowly and walks off. And it's like we go from a
Yeah.
4-1 situation to yeah, Brett won. And obviously, Brett Koenig is amazing, and that's what he does. And he's really strong in those positions, and we are aware of that. And instead of committing to what we know that we should do as a team. And I know you're looking for specifics here, but a lot of that was, I would say, just plain old mistakes and not taking the situation um, as sharply as you should in one of those very very hard situations. Now that game in general was, I would argue, the best that we've done against England
Yep.
in terms of. Stefan, you were touching in on ball possession, of deciding when to release those riskier balls, and making good decisions and being protective of kind of that ball possession. But that situation, yeah, it will haunt me for the rest of my days.
I hope, Brad. I probably have to clip that. I've never clipped something, but that's worth a clip. Just to haunt Pierre forever. But I think,
I want to touch in on something real
yeah,
fast because I think people might haunt me if I don't. The women's did actually win a bronze many years ago when the Euros was in Stockholm. So we have a good line to kind of beat. That was a little bit before a lot of the rules and the competition was formalized. So at this competitive level, I would say that a medal for the women's would be the first. But I just want to put a little flag down of the Swedish women that have represented in the past. Yeah.
that's a good move. Very good. So I think for now, basically, we sort of start over with the 5-ball dodgeball, because I think
Yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
many nations started to take the game more serious. And before that, it was basically just England and Scotland and a few other British nations, and someone who was just fortunate enough to get the third spot. But I think looking back on that, that was just playing some balls, and now it's really become a sport of tactics. And I think that situation, I've seen that game of Sweden against England, and it was such a good game. It was such a high level game, and that's where you can really see like the potential. That's always a bad word in that sort of surrounding, but I think like Sweden has had that potential looming over them over the last 3 or 4 years, where everyone was like, okay, they have a lot of really good players who have really strong arms, who started developing the other dodgeball skills as well, and who are smart enough to know how to play the game. So we know in theory they should be up there and they should be fighting for those top spots, but for some reason, for one reason or another, they never really could live up to that potential. With and I would exempt the women's team in Osijek from that, because that was a really really strong show and it could have gone either way. So there was always, I think, like the semi-final against England was also a very open game in the beginning. So I think there was the first time that you could really see that transition into a much more structured and smarter playing style, I would say. So, um, what kind of measures did you take from Worlds to Euros to get rid of those situations?
Good question. It's been a lot of just in-depth analysis rather than having broad generalizable statements. We've been looking a lot at that game and at games that we've done well or that we've done poorly in terms of decision making. Hard to make broad statements, but I think what one of the main thing, and we're very much touching in on the same subject, but the risk management of um, historically Sweden has been a little bit, I have a ball, I will throw it, and kind of uh, climbing up to the perspective of, okay, what happens if I throw it first, second, and third level of what happens next, has kind of been the focus of these past, I would say, 8 9 months. Not that we haven't discussed it before, obviously, because that is the root of the tactical perspective in dodgeball. We've been delving deeper into very specific situations, looking at a game, pausing, and then having a long discussion while on pause on everybody in the situation and what decisions they should make from an individual perspective, and then what decisions you can expect your teammates to make, and kind of merging that into the synergy that you want. I know that that's not really helpful and that that's what everybody's doing, but we have been trying to just focus on, yeah, I'm going into loops. I'm saying the same thing.
No, fair enough. I think that is as specific as you can get on a generalized question like this, because it is very dependent on the situation. And as you said, like that deep analysis of certain situations, it's what it's all about, I think, because that is what, in my opinion, makes it different between high level and higher level and lower level players and teams, because dodgeball is pretty easy from the outside. You throw at people hard, you try to hit them, you try to not get caught, you try to dodge and survive, and if you're doing that pretty good, then you're gonna have a chance. But that's a very simplistic view, and the deep
Yeah.
layer of dodgeball is that there are so many different situations and so many so complex situations. And the thing that makes a good team, the thing that makes a really good player, is that you can decide really fast what is the proper answer for a proper question, or the proper solution for the specific problem. But the next level is to do that on a team level, and that
Yeah.
is where it's really hard. So if you see Brad alone, he is extremely good at making the right decision, and he has all the skills in his toolbox to do what he needs to do, and he doesn't have to coordinate with anyone else. So he really exploits the team's coordination struggles and their communication gaps. And so as one person, he can be much more efficient and effective in certain situations than a team can be. And if you don't understand that relationship as a team, then you can lose a 1v6, which should never happen in cloth dodgeball, in my opinion. But it
Sure.
still happens. And I have exploited lots of those gaps in my time. And because it's just really hard to coordinate a whole team. And as you said, Kajsa, some players are like, oh, we're going to play it really safe and play down the clock. And other players are like, oh, he's going to hit me out. If I don't do anything, he's just going to eliminate one after the
Yeah.
other. And if it's 1.5 minutes, then we're going to end up losing anyway. So go aggressive at him. And if there's two people who are throwing at the same time with two different opinions, and one plays it safe into the floor and the other one hits him in the chest, he's going to make a
Yeah.
catch and turn it around. And I think those are the like little fine nuances on the game that are so hard, that everyone basically understands from the outside, but that are so hard to really drill into a team and get a team to connect around them. And that's where I think at the moment is the difference between different nations. And that is where Northern Ireland is really good. Austria is quite really good, I'd say. And England is quite good. But England is still at least up to Worlds. And that, in my opinion, would cost them the titles. And probably they did a lot of work to like limit those errors. Is they have so many good players, but the structure and the different views on the game really hurt them sometimes. But against teams who aren't developed to that point, and I always have Italy as a prime example, because Italy against England is like always a game where Italy leads every set 5-3, 5-2, and doesn't win a single set. Because the moment there are two English players left, you're in trouble, because that's where the coordination, they're both maybe from the same club, have been playing for a long time, and then they start clicking, and then it's so hard to get that last person with a ball out. So that was a bit of a rant from my side, but
No,
I mean,
100%. And I would say, sorry, Kajsa, I'm
Yeah.
gonna let you jump in before I go on a long rant. But I would say that that's the case for, or have been historically the case for us as well. We've had a lot of very strong throwers. We've been a throwing nation by and large, and it's only relatively recently, if you consider the whole history of Dodgeball Sweden, where we're really trying to merge those competences and having those 2v4 clicking moments. And obviously there are problems to the geographical distribution of Sweden, where we don't have the opportunity to play against each other as much as we would like. But once you start seeing what works to make those kind of synergetic combos where people can just go, okay, now we are 2v4, but we can claw this back, and that's not a problem if we just play like you and me always do every Thursday, then those moments are absolutely golden. But so I totally agree. Sorry, Kajsa, shoot.
No, I think you summarized it pretty good, Pierre. I don't know if I have any more to add, but yeah, of course, it's an advantage. I think also like England, they are so good at like coming back from being like under, like with players. Uh, and I think there's a few things you can learn from them in that regard. Being like, yeah, playing good from underdog
Yeah.
position.
Mm?
And
Yeah.
I feel with Italy, and I've seen that tendency as well, which has made it super interesting when we're playing Italy, because when we end up in those situations, it can go either way because nobody really know what's going to happen because there's no structure, or there hasn't been any very clear structure that you can depend on. So there is excitement and just a lot of spectator value from having those kind of chaotic situations at the end. But it again, it does hurt bringing up the haunting memory of Brett Koenig demolishing us in a 1v4. Yeah.
Yeah, but those are the situations you grow from because you
Oh yes.
don't want to live through them again. You can't. Fool me once, shame on you, but this can't
Yes.
happen again. Okay, so Brad, you're not gonna turn a 1v4 against Sweden this year, I believe. So you
Correct.
better leave in another player with you. Okay, so yeah, I think that's as specific basically as we can get on that topic. So outside from that, how is the structure for Team Sweden for this Euros? Like, when did you? I know it got a little bit into it with Ben, like what you guys planned, but now it's 4 weeks out. Not even. It's like 3.5 weeks out. So how many training camps did you have? When did you decide who's gonna be in the squad? How did you decide whether you played players double for mixed and separate divisions? How did you decide on who's gonna coach, who's gonna play? All of that. Maybe start from a player's perspective, Kajsa. Like, when did you know you would be picked for both divisions, and like how did the training from there on, then on out look for you as a player?
Yeah, so I got the call from Pierre and from the Stockholm Dodgeball Association in the I think it was the beginning of February, and then after confirming that I was gonna play, we have had I think in mix we had had two training camps, one in Lund and one in Gothenburg, and then in women's we have also done those and have had an additional one in Aarhus. So that has been like the opportunities for us to play together and find each other as a team. And for me, playing as a player from Stockholm, I'm the only person from Stockholm playing in both mix and in women's. So it's a bit different for me because the other players they have opportunities to play together at a club level, but I need to kind of find those connections in these camps. So I need to
Mhm.
adopt a lot, and yeah, so
Okay,
it's a
and
bit different
how
in
do you
that
feel
case.
like the preparation for Euros have been going, and what's still left to do in those last 3 weeks for you?
So I think the preparation has been good. I have the advantage that my the team that we train together here in Stockholm, it's a lot of men's players. So we had advanced cloth, and it's only men typically, and that gives me a very good opportunity to kind of like practice against stronger players. So you always have that kind of like underdog mentality and kind of maybe I'm not the strongest one, but I need to be smarter. I need to take advantage of their weaknesses. So I think that kind of gives me the opportunity to kind of see the game from a different aspect. Because then when I play women's or mix, I think it's almost like easier than my practice environment. So it's kind of like an advantage. So it's really good preparation for me. And then I also do a lot of gym practicing, running, and spinning to be in great shape. So now it's just focus on keeping my body like
Perfect.
in the best shape it can
And do
be,
you have any
basically.
competitions left before Euros,
Yeah.
or is it now only a little bit of training and then head into Limerick?
Yeah, now it's only training and yeah, focusing on Limerick. So we don't have any competitions. I we were a few players that went
Mhm.
and played in Switzerland a few weeks ago, and that was very useful. But that was not with the national team, but it was very good practice for me just to refine my own skill set and like have a
Mhm.
bit of competitive dodgeball. So that was also a
Awesome.
good
All
preparation,
right.
I
So the
think.
coach's perspective on that,
Yeah.
Pierre, how have the last few months gone by, and what's left to do to get the spectaculars into spectacular shape for Limerick?
Yeah, but I mean, it's the same with the only exception of me being a coach. I don't have to train as hard as Kajsa. Haha.
Beautiful.
I'm focusing a lot on,
Yeah.
on watching games and kind of making overall preparations in terms of strategic and if you differentiate strategic from tactics, then the strategic approach has been what I've been focusing on recently, so to speak.
Mhm.
But from a structure perspective, I want to say 4, 5 national team training camps, maybe. Could
Mhm.
that be correct? And we are kind of expanding on that a little bit every year, but obviously it's hard from a tall country like Sweden to kind of get everybody together. But so far, everybody have been really committed, and turnout is great at national camps and stuff. So yeah, and you were asking about kind of selections and stuff, I think.
Mhm.
And yeah, but basically a lot of that comes from our head manager of Dodgeball Sweden, which is Ben. So the overarching structure of what we're doing in the Swedish Federation comes a little bit from Ben and his thoughts, his inspiration, and so on. So the structure is a little bit similar to what we had, like internal structures, and who is making the decisions obviously change, but we have a national team committee who decides on the coaches, and then the coaches and the national team committee kind of discuss the players and talk about the players, especially the players in other cities that you might not have a good understanding of where they are from a competence perspective, and so you kind of talk it together, and then we discuss the teams, and so it's a bit of a joint venture of selection process.
Mhm. So that's one thing I wanted to ask you as well is how do you pick the players? Because as you said, you don't have a national league, so there seems to be, at least to me, quite limited exposure for certain players. So how do you like put potential prospects into the mix? Who decides whom to like bring to the table, and how many people decide whether players are going to be in the national squad or not?
Open discussion is the very very short answer to that.
Hmm.
You have yeah, the committee who kind of decides on the coaches, and then when we have training camp, when we have I would say the first one after any large competition, say Euros or World Championship, uh, then we kind of bring in extra amount of players. If I have a couple of prospects from Gothenburg, I will bring them, and then prospects from other cities come, and you play with and against each other. So you get to kind of um, lacking the word here, but kind of look at the players at the highest level you can in Sweden, which is national team training camp, the highest
Hmm.
level of dodgeball that we have, with the exception of maybe nationals. But that's not really enough, especially if it's late in the year. So you kind of get to watch the players in that context, and then you have a discussion internally in the Dodgeball Sweden structure to say, okay, this player has a can really grow in this department, or this role is now a little bit open. Who do we see filling this space or this spot? And so open discussion is the boring answer, but I think it
Hmm.
kind of qualifies, as it isn't really watch a video, vote, or whatever. It's more, okay,
Yeah.
who do we see fitting in this spot so that we can fill a gap or whatever.
Okay. But in the end, you still have to vote, or how do you decide on someone? Because open discussion only leads you so far. In the end, you're
Fair
gonna.
enough. So the coaches kind of come up with what players they are seeing on the team,
Mhm.
and then propose that to the national team committee, and then the national team committee discusses that internally and go, well, have you considered this player? You probably haven't seen the whoever person X, because
Mhm.
they weren't at nationals and they weren't at the camp where everybody was getting graded in lack of a better word, and so you need to consider this player, and then you go, okay, you go back to the table and you talk a little bit about it. So coaches select the team, but the national team committee can veto that.
Okay.
So to kind of avoid the geographical bias that that is a risk, obviously, in a geographically like separated country.
Okay, so basically it's a two-step where you basically the coach decides for his or her team, and then the committee has a veto right, and but in the end the coach has the final say, or does the committee have the final say? And do the coaches? Okay, committee has the final say. So basically, if the coach said that's my team, the committee has to say and approve that team.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I don't know to what extent that veto has ever been enforced or used, but it's kind of a fail-safe to ensure that no coach go, I'm gonna bring all my friends.
Okay, yeah.
And that's, I think, a good fail-safe to have in a federation as young as ours. Not that that has been a problem, but we kind of want to stratify the decision-making process to ensure that that isn't going to be a problem either.
Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. So I'm just asking because I'm really interested in that structure always, because I've been a part of that structure for the last 10 years in Austria. And we've also like run through different stages of who decides it, how the discussion, how the voting, how the transparency and everything works. And we've refined that process in a way, like every year, basically, as the surroundings changed, because in the beginning we just had 10 players and we said, you're going to play. And now we have many more and we have to say no to certain players. So the process has become much more delicate and also professional. But I think that's a really important thing to also for the community itself to not get too toxic or competitive, because the more players you have, the better the pool is, the more players are not going to be chosen. And now obviously you have foam as well, where you can like sort of have a second bucket where you can put people in that just want to go to international tournaments, or have another division where people can excel at. So that leaves a little bit more breathing space. At least that's my experience in Austria. But still, every year it gets a little bit tighter. It gets a little bit more competitive, and we have obviously that sort of community feel to it, and we are very social, very inclusive and stuff. But in the end of the day, it's also very competitive at some point, and it's sometimes tough to like balance those two interests out on that kind of stage. So that's why I'm just really interested in that process, how different nations do it.
And I'm curious to ask a little bit about Austria and how you do it, just as a kind of learning opportunity. But I also want you touched in on foam, and I think we are in a pretty luxurious position there, because I think a lot of the European nation, by and large, just have, okay, let's try foam. Like those who didn't at the Worlds in Edmonton, or those who didn't in Graz, go, well, you know what, we might go now because foam might be fun. We are in a pretty strong position there, because as Kajsa was mentioning, we have a pretty strong community of foam players in Stockholm. Gothenburg has been having foam practices for, I want to say 2 years now, 1 year, 2 year. So we already have those pools of players in foam that are very committed to the format. And so we have a little bit of a luxury position that I'm hoping that we're going to exert during Euros and hopefully claim all the medals.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see the foam team play. I think they're gonna
I'm really
do
looking
really
forward
well.
to the foam.
There's so many good players.
To the foam tournament as well, because I think like in Austria we also have a lot of players who like really focused on foam like 1 or 2 years ago, especially before Worlds and now after Worlds as well. So we have a established foam community, but we have a lot of double players who play both. So if there's a foam tournament, I'm gonna play foam because it's fun, it's dodgeball. So I'm gonna practice glove, but I still really enjoy playing foam. And so we have a lot of players who play both. And then when the decision comes, we like this year we did it in a way where every player had to say what is their preferred ball type and what where they see themselves, and then we decided as a committee. So the way it works in Austria, we have two committees for foam and for cloth. They're separate, but they meet together for those kind of decisions. And I think the cloth committee is made up of 5 people from each club, each of the main clubs in Austria. So you have to have a team in every division basically to certify your club as a member of the committee. And
Oh,
then
by the way, I forgot to say congratulations on the league finals. That was
thank you.
awesome game. Yeah, sorry. Shoot.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good interception right there. Yeah, what was yeah. So basically, you have to have a certain requirements to fulfill them to be on the committee, and then there is like one person from Dodgeball Austria and stuff. And the way it works, it's basically the coaches are in that committee plus other representatives from different big clubs. So you basically have someone from each club that is in the first Austrian league. And so we have a very balanced view, because in the past that wasn't the way. We started with just doing it from the coaches, but the coaches were only representing a few clubs, so some clubs felt left out and stuff like that. So we try to balance it more and make it more like transparent, but also more structured, how in the future it's going to work, how you get a place on the committee and stuff like that. So I think the process at this point is quite refined and working quite well. It's still always a tough decision in the end. And for this year, especially, we wanted to give both formats the best possibility to win medals. So we also try to not take all the good players away from foam and not leave them with a few key players. And so it was sort of a balance where we tried to take a lot of different points of view into consideration and try to balance it out throughout everything, which is always a struggle. But I think it turned out quite well in the end. And in the future, it's probably going to be easier the bigger the playing pool is, especially for the foam division. But it's also just gets harder and harder. But that is like a luxury to have, at least from a
But would you
coach's
say then
perspective.
that committee? Would you say then that committee made out of the representatives of each club has final say, as you remove that final say from the coaches?
Yeah, they have complete final say. So it's 5 people at the moment, and and you vote on every player basically, and the majority wins. So if a player is 3-2, then he's in or she's in, basically.
Yeah.
I had another question. As you have such a big player pool, for example, in women's, this year you did you swapped the entire lineup. Like, how did you land in that decision to have that kind of style?
I think I touched
that was very
on it
interesting
a
to
little
see.
bit in some podcasts, but basically what my main struggle throughout the last years as the coach of the women's team was to get them to believe in themselves. So basically I always knew I had the best team, and we were tactically and just from a skill place, from a depth perspective, I thought we had the best team. And obviously we won a lot, but I never felt we played up to our potential in the past. And it always came down to I often say this to my team in pre-game talks, that the only team that can beat us is us. So we are the only team that can beat us ourselves. And sometimes that happens. And especially in games against England, that was always such a high pressure situation where the pressure and the burden of being the favorites for the last few years really weighed on our women's team. And sometimes we couldn't perform up to our potential. And so I really talked to Andy a lot before the World Cup. And I was really the last few weeks and months before the World Cup, I was really struggling to find a way to get the women's team to believe in themselves and find the confidence that I knew they should have. And so I sort of started playing with it in practice, where I just tried different combinations, different teams. And now Kajsa is gone. So I'm just going to explain it to you, Pierre, and she's going to have
Yeah.
to listen to it afterwards. So I tried a few different combinations with different players without telling them what I planned behind. And I found out that they felt much better that way. So when they knew what their role was, when they knew how much time they had, when they knew that the competitiveness in the team wasn't that high, that they had their certain role and they would be put out of the game after 2 mistakes or something, that gave them so much confidence and such a boost that it
Yeah.
really mitigated all the technical skill differences in the team. And we had a really, really strong squad of 12 or 14 really high level players. So that made it possible to do it like that. And then I felt like it worked out so well in training. I'm just going to start the first game like this. And I didn't tell them that I would do that beforehand. I just told them there, I said, okay, we're going to do it this way and see how it goes. And then it worked out. And then we luckily had the game against England in the group. So I thought, okay, we're just going to continue this way. This is a perfect trial for this system. And if it works, perfect, then we're just going to continue. But I always left it open to the team. I said, we're going to play this way. We see for the future, we have fail safes in place, but this is the way I want you to play. And if you if if you adapt to it and if it works out, then we're just going to keep playing this way. And for many reasons, and I feel the most important thing about it was that every player on the team knew their role and knew also like that the whole
Yeah.
pressure and the whole expectations were really balanced throughout the whole team. So there were 12 players who could sort of lift that load together, and it worked out beautiful. And like there was a little competition between the two teams, so every team
Yeah.
just wanted to get in there and show the other team that they could win more sets, and we were just smashing people left and right. And it was really like the only competition at that Worlds was basically between our two teams. They were called Boom Shakalaka and Queerly Queerly. So we had one team of of
Oh,
more
okay.
throwing power, maybe from the outside, and one team that was maybe a little bit faster on the wing. So I also tried to give the opponents different opposition to work with, which it could be quite tough. And yeah, it worked out perfectly. But I think in maybe in the future that is something
Yeah.
where the game maybe develop too, because it's much easier to play 3 sets full out and then rest 3 sets. But you need to have the squad depth, and
Yeah.
at this point, it's not easy to do. So we'll see how we do it this year in Limerick. But yeah, that was definitely like the pinnacle of our team performance, and that was a cool idea I had, and it worked out just way better than I expected, to be honest.
And that's interesting. And obviously, I think many of the coaches have faced this problem of the kind of how to say not dissonance, but the difficulty with having to take off a player that just came in for 1 or 2 sets, and the psychological impact that has on a player for potentially the rest of that game, or even worse, the rest of the tournament. And having those half switches. We've tried that in the past. I know that we did it predominantly when Sweden was visiting for CEC, where we were actually knocking down Austria second team from from taking the silver medal, as I think you've done every time previous to that. But so that then we did exactly the same thing. So we had Uppsala and Stockholm, which was called Stocksala, and then Göteborg, which was a lot of predominantly Gothenburgian players. And it did wonders from the psychological level. But as you're saying, you really need the depth to be able to do that. And I think a lot of the European countries are not in a position to just make blanket change of this is what's going to happen. And obviously you have fail safes, but independent of what happens, you are now going to play 3 sets, and now then you're going to play 3 sets. That is, I think, a luxury of having a very deep squad.
Yeah.
I'm not completely uh, foreign to the idea of having that as a structure that we can come back to as Sweden. But I think we have other things that we wanna try and do first that I think might work better, at least for now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be interested to see what you come up with, because I think that is such a tough thing as a coach to like how big, and I talk to Max Gold a lot about that. What is like the perfect rotation, and the
Yeah,
perfect rotation and what is required sometimes is really tough to balance out, because there, if you have a player who's a little bit tired, is he still better than a player that is not as good but who's well rested? But then
yeah,
again, he didn't play against the other opponent, so he maybe needs a little bit of time to get into the game. So it's so tough to do those rotations. And basically what we have done for the last few tournaments is play games where it really counts with 7 to 8 players, so really low rotation. And basically we just switch players out if they are too tired or if they don't work in these certain situations. And then again, we have a few players where we, in certain situations, put them in, but the rotations were really low. But on the other hand, it is really a kind of difficult thing to swap players out or leave players like Lisa Leichtfried, to put her out for 3 sets in a final in a row. That is not easy to do. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I think every nation basically struggles with this, and that is where coaches who are players as well struggle even much more. So I think it's really important to have that outside perspective, because knowing it as a player myself, if I do the rotation, it's really tough to know when to swap yourself out, when to swap the other wing out. You don't see everything. So
Yeah.
those decisions, I think in every sport, they are tough, and the coaches get criticized or hyped for them afterwards, and everyone is a good coach the day after. But yeah, I think there is still a lot of different things we can try out in dodgeball, and I think we're not even close to where it's going to be in a few years once the playing depth is sufficient in many more nations.
And expectations and expectation management for that matter.
Absolutely.
Because like a lot of the players in the dodgeball community have gone in to dodgeball and don't have necessarily a strong sports background from other sports. Obviously, there are differing points on that, and some people come from the handball community, some people have other sports, but we do have a lot of players that just did dodgeball, and so kind of going from a perspective of I'm gonna play to I'm gonna go, and if I get to play, awesome, is a really big step just from a sports culture perspective. So I think the expectation management part from leadership and from coaches has become from Sweden's standpoint instrumental in communicating with the team and players of now you're going to play, now you're not going to play, and maybe I'm not going to know until the very last moment if you're going to play, but I need you to be part of the team. I need you to be warm and be ready, and maybe not, but this is what we need from you. And that perspective has kind of grown as dodgeball in Sweden has been growing, and I assume it's a lot for it's the same for a lot of the other European countries. But we kind of get back to the depth thing for Lightspeed or for Max Metz, for example, where if you have the opportunity to not play a player like that, it's a very nice situation to have, which is not if you're not one of the top three teams that always make it to at least one of the finals, then that luxury of resting that player, especially in the knockout stages where you need that win to kind of pass on, and then suddenly you have a player that's tired. Obviously, that part of the bigger game and the selection and the depth of the player basis. But when we grow, I'm really looking forward to seeing where that kind of goes in terms of the coach's decision of when to rest players and not, whereas this has been a little bit dependent on the squads more now than it has on the decision making process.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's every nation has those same struggles. So maybe once more, the little comparison between handball and dodgeball. So in the handball world, probably you know your role, you know it's community communicated quite clearly. And obviously, dodgeball is a completely self-funded endeavor. So if you go to European Championships, you pay a lot of money to do so. So you want to play, you want to have that experience. So that is also a part that you can't neglect completely. So how has that been different, or the difference from those point of views where it's like completely probably based on merit and what the team needs, and then going to dodgeball where there are so many more needs to fulfill to keep everyone happy basically, and then there's also the competitive side to it. So how I know like from Euros, there may have been some situations where that balance cost you some points, not you directly. I think it's was maybe the men's team, but there have been those struggles, I think, for every nation. And so how do you see that as a player, Kajsa?
I think in handball, as you have a more established like series, you play like games every weekend with your team, so you're very used to compete with them. I think in dodgeball, as we don't have as many like tournaments, you're not really that used to like the energy that the team brings always. So that can also be interesting when you are not like you don't train together as much or like compete as much together. You can sometimes, when it's like very tight games, see the energy shift a lot within the team. And when you are like in handball, when you play with the same team for multiple years, you know everyone, you know how to handle frustration, like high emotions, or those kind of like feelings. I think in dodgeball that can be different at times, and like it's also very interesting to like watch different teams and how they handle very tight games, because I think every team kind of handle it kind of differently. Like some teams are very like loud and emotional, and some teams, like I was very impressed with like the USA men's, they were very like calm and collected regardless what happened. So I think that is very like interesting, and it's very different when you play dodgeball in comparison to handball. Because I think in handball, like there's always a lot of emotions. We're screaming at each other, at refs, and like often very like high energy. And that's not allowed in dodgeball in the same way, but in some games, like people are still very emotional. But I'm very impressed with the teams that can like remain calm and collected throughout like a very
Mhm.
important game. So
Yeah,
that's yeah
that's a good
one aspect
that's a good
that I like.
observation. I think that is I talked to Joe Zanon just a week
Yeah.
ago, and that is something Italy struggle a lot, and they try to work on. And that is something that is really tough in those situations where you're
Yeah.
really emotionally completely invested. Every decision is so close, and the refs
Yeah.
make something that in your eyes maybe wasn't the right call,
Yeah.
and then to keep it together and really focus on the
Yeah.
job ahead, that is, yeah, that takes a certain skill, and that's something, yeah.
Yeah, I also think like emotions, like they spread. If you express some type of
Mm,
emotion, that will spread within the team. So it will be both positive and negative. So it's so important that you manage your own emotions and kind of like what you spread it within your team as well. Because like in a team, like how you communicate with each other will be, I
yeah,
guess, the key to succeed kind of in those tough moments. Yeah. And
cool.
handle like, yeah.
So let's bring this to an end, unless you have some other questions. Like my final questions to
No.
you is the prediction for this year's Euros results in the women's game. Kajsa, you get to do the women's top five in order, and Pierre, you can already think about the mixed division.
Oh,
And you may now the draft is out,
okay.
the uh, the knockout stage trees, and so we have more information. I don't know them by heart, so um, maybe your predictions might be not even possible, but go ahead anyways, like from this.
Okay. Okay, so then I would say I think Austria will be winning the tournament, so I will put Austria on number one. And then I would say probably
Me
because I
neither.
don't know the knockout tree, so I don't know what's possible, but just based on what I've seen before, I think yeah, Austria number one, and I would say England at number two, and then I would place Sweden at number three, and Northern Ireland at 4,
All
and
right.
then Italy at 5.
Okay,
That
perfect.
would be my
As for every
prediction. Yeah.
guest, if your prediction comes true, you get a drink at the after party. Otherwise, you owe me one. No, I can't drink that much.
Amazing.
All right. So we lock that in. Austria,
That's a good
England,
deal.
Sweden, Northern Ireland, and Italy in that order. All right. Love it. Good, Pierre. You get to do the same thing for the mixed category.
Hard. Well, I like obviously we're going home with the gold medal, so we're just talking about
Obviously.
2, 3, 4, and
Yeah,
5.
obviously.
And I think that now, luckily for NI, they have been able to kind of train and potentially even get a little bit better when they've been meeting us for every single tournament for the past 5 years, including the NEC, both Worlds, and the last Euros. We've been in the same group. So
Yeah.
I think just because they have played us so much, they're going to end up second. I'm actually going to put Austria at 4 and England at 3 because I think England is really keen on kind of beating Austria because I think they've watched the Austria-England games probably even more diligently than Austria have because they have a score to settle with you. And then for 5, I would really like to see France. We haven't played France in so long, but I've seen the progress that they've made, and so I'm really putting out a little hoping 5th position for France. So Sweden, NI, England, Austria, then France for mix is my call.
All right.
Also, if
That's a
we
good...
win, I'll buy you a beer.
Okay, fair enough. Because I really, really, really hope that I don't have to buy you a beer for that prediction. But fair enough. You are the first bold guest to this show who put us out of the top 3, which is good. Someone needs to hold us accountable, and it's exactly the fuel I need. That's what I was hoping for from this podcast. So Pierre, now it got personal, and we'll see
Perfect.
about that.
Also,
I
now
will...
if you win, it's thanks to me, one can say.
Obviously, I'm gonna if I win, I'm gonna get you a drink, and then I'm gonna integrate you into my speech afterwards. You were the whole reason we did that.
Yeah, perfect.
No, that is beautiful. I love it. All right, guys, is there anything else that you feel we need to touch on for the Swedish side to the road to Limerick?
I do. I want to touch in on that just really quickly of the similar groups that have occurred over the past couple of years, and I think that qualifies for.
Collusion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's time to get
But
our tinfoil hats out and start a conspiracy.
exactly, but I think it's been specifically the case for Austria, men's and women's, maybe not
Yeah.
mixed as much, but the groups have been similar, and I've been looking into kind of on my own time potential solutions to try to spread the pool better so that geographical differences and similar groups come into effect when doing the draw. And obviously that's a complicated topic,
Yeah.
but for example, for Worlds, when we go to Worlds, I'd rather not play Northern Ireland that are in NEC. I'd rather play US or whatever. And so I'm looking into that, and I'm kind of seeing if there is support for that around the community. So for anybody who listens into the podcast, which I know is a lot of people, if you're interested in that topic or if you have good ideas, I have a couple of frameworks that I'm working on. Do reach out, and we can explore that together to kind of make sure that everybody's playing each other. We haven't, for example, played Austria in mixed in what, 8, 9, 10 years?
Yeah, I have no idea. Endless time. Yeah, I was so hoping for playing Spain in some division, and it doesn't seem to be the case. So I think there are certain situations where we can play them in a knockout, but not really likely. So I'm really sad about that. I was really hoping.
PS,
But
Spain on 6th place.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, you're leaving Scotland completely out of there. I'm gonna tell Scotty about that. Like it. All right. No, I think it's gonna. I think this Euros are gonna be really interesting, and I think it's gonna be really hard to make. I think those predictions are all gonna fall through in the end, but it's still fun to do. And yeah, still we're gonna try to win them all. You're gonna try to win them all, and so will the other nations. So I think we're up for a good tournament in Limerick in a few weeks. So
100%.
with that, thank you guys for hopping on. Keep throwing those balls. Try not to get caught. And take care, everyone. Fucked it up again. Damn it. But we're going to leave it like that. It's too much work otherwise.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Solid pod. Love the pod. And yeah, see you in Limerick.
See you in Limerick, guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much.